Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me once again today, and welcome back to our discussion of blood magic. This was the second part. We're going to talk primarily about the national blood spells, which is why I've got all the national blood spells pulled up right here. First, there's one generic blood spell that I really need to talk about. I completely forgot to mention it, I guess because, I don't know, I'm used to blood, so it seems obvious to me or something. Curse of Blood. Curse of Blood is probably the single most famous generic blood spell in the game. It summons vampire lords, and the thing about vampire lords is not only are they powerful mages, death 3, blood 3, great cross path, very powerful, they're also immortal. So, of course, if they're killed, they just respawn back where they were summoned in 3 turns. And they fly, they have high map move, so all of this combines, oh, and they're stealthy, and they have invulnerability. All of this combines to make vampires basically the perfect raider. Vampire lords can just fly into enemy provinces, spam skeletons. They spam skeletons very efficiently. They can cast Horde of Skeletons 5 times before taking a brief nap to cast again. And they can take most provinces by themselves. On top of that, of course, they're very powerful battlecasters. With a little bit of support, they can cast Darkness. They can cast Shadow Blast if you need damage output. They can cast Rigor Mortis with a Skull Staff. All kinds of stuff. They're very, very powerful casters. And they can blood hunt and replicate themselves. A vampire lord takes 77 blood slaves to summon. A vampire lord blood hunting will get you 1d6 plus 3 blood slaves per turn, as long as the province is good. Or you can give him a sanguine dowsing rod. Now it's 1d6 plus 4. So he'll average, 6 or 7 blood slaves a turn, which means in about 10 turns, a vampire lord can generate another vampire lord, even if you have no other blood hunters. And if you're summoning vampire lords, you have other blood hunters. Also, if you give a vampire a skull staff, a vampire lord, that vampire lord can now summon other vampire lords, and thus free up your original vampire lord summoner, who may have been your god, to go do something more valuable. So vampire lords overall are like the Grey Goo scenario of late game dominions. A blood nation with death crosspaths can spam out an unreasonable number of vampire lords. And they become very oppressive. They become very oppressive very quickly, actually, because they are so powerful, they are so fast, they are so efficient in so many different ways. Also, they spawn chaff for free just by standing around. They free spawn thralls, which are not good units, but are units nonetheless. These guys, these little dudes, they're shit units, but you can use them to patrol. They're free of upkeep, and they're they just, it's just another thing that makes vampires kind of nifty. So, vampire lords, extremely powerful. Now let's get into the and I can't believe I forgot to mention them. They are probably the first thing most players think of when you say blood. They have been slightly nerfed by the immortal changes, but to be honest, making Soul Slay kill immortals permanently, it makes a lot of sense. It doesn't lower their power level all that much. It makes it slightly easier for Astral nations to kill immortals. Beyond that, doesn't have a whole lot of effects. There is, I think, one forgeable weapon that actually has a Soul Slay effect. Beyond that, all of the other instant kill spells don't count because they aren't technically Soul Slaying. Like Petrify, Disintegrate, all that stuff does not still kill immortals. So it's only Soul Slay itself. Bloodright is actually Bloodright suffers greatly by comparison to Curse of Blood because it doesn't summon a vampire lord. But to be fair, vampire units like this are actually pretty powerful. They have invulnerability 25, they have stealth, they have resistances except for fire, they regenerate, which doesn't matter too much, but they also have this life drain attack, which is armor piercing. So they're actually rather similar to a national summon that I'm going to talk about, albeit not quite as good. We'll just leave that up there for now. And now let's look at the national blood spells. I need you to actually show me things. Blood national. Okay. There's a whole bunch of national blood spells. There are some nations for which their national blood spells are defining. And then there are some nations for which their national blood spells are just kind of nice. The nations that are almost defined by their national blood spells. The Hinnom line, partially. Hinnom has a lot of other good stuff going for them, but the national blood spells are definitely a big part of it. The Mictlan and Xibalba lines, which have these spells down here, and Lanka and the Lankan monkey nations. Let's talk about... Let's start from the top, actually, and work our way down. We'll talk about Lanka last, because for my purposes, Lanka is actually the most interesting right now. Late Age Pythium has this spell Orgy, which lets it summon satyrs. Satyrs free spawn Maenads. Late Age Pythium can get Blood Nature Crosspath Mages rarely. It's difficult, but it's worth doing just for this spell. It only costs 1 Blood Slave, and it free spawns Chaff. And Chaff is pretty decent. So you can just cast Orgy a whole bunch of times and summon Satyrs and free spawn a whole bunch of Maenads. It's slow to ramp up, but once you ramp it up, you can get a pretty decent quantity of these ladies and drop buffs on them, and they work fine. You can be like miniature shitty Pangea. It does not save Late Age Pythium from being a terrible nation, but it's a nice little Benny. Abyssea has the Infernal Breeding spell. Infernal Breeding is a much more powerful version of the generic spell Crossbreeding. Crossbreeding generates 20 random bad chaff, with occasionally a good unit mixed in there. Infernal Breeding generates a large number, I forget exactly how many, but a large number of units, and they're mostly actually quite good. Infernal Breeding, I think they're called Hellbred, or Hellspawn. Yeah, Hellspawn. Hellspawn are generally good. Like, these guys are pretty chaffy, but even so, they have 3 attacks. They have armored guys with flails and multiple attacks, including a flame-belching AoE 1 attack. They've got guys with poisoned claws and tails and 21 prot. They've got guys who fly and have double attacks. They've got this flying lance charge guy with 18 prot. They have Hellbred giants who are amazingly powerful. Hellbred Horites are pretty sucky, but even they give good siege power. Hellspawn commonly start with afflictions, but and many of them are undisciplined. But even so, Infernal Breeding is a fantastic spell, and it's an excellent slave dump for Abyssea. If you need units, Hellspawn and Hellbred units are fantastic for that purpose. So Infernal Breeding, very, very good addition to Abyssea's repertoire. Kind of saves you from relying on the shitty Abyssean units. Abyssean units are just too expensive for what they do. Breeding Hellspawn is one way you can get around that. Baratos has a special spell that calls Melkarts. These are the same as the Melkarts of Hinnom, except they actually can random, I believe they can random air instead of astral, which is actually really kind of a bonus. Yeah, the Melkarts of Hinnom random astral instead of air, and also the Melkarts that Baratos summons are Holy 3. So I take that back. Baratos' Melkarts are objectively superior to the Melkarts of Hinnom, which is sort of hilarious, to be honest. Because if they get air 2, they can Cloud Trapeze and cast Mist Form on themselves, which is stupidly good for a supercombatant of Melkart caliber. Plus, of course, they can give themselves the Bless. So yeah, summoning Melkarts, very, very powerful. Something you'll probably do in limited quantities, but extremely useful. You also have this spell. Scapegoats and Summon Se'irim are 2 different versions of the same spell. Ashdod really can't use it because Ashdod has no native blood. Baratos and Gath, they both summon Se'ir. I've talked about Se'ir before. Se'ir are very, very good units. Baratos and Gath summon them 2 at a time for 8 slaves. Hinnom and Ashdod, or really just Hinnom, can summon them 5 at a time for 23 slaves, which is a little bit of a discount. Well, actually, it's about the same price. It's slightly more expensive for Hinnom, but Hinnom gets 5 of them for a single cast, which is absolutely worth it. Especially if you take a very powerful Bless, Se'ir are amazingly potent. Even if you don't, Berserker plus 4 means they hit at strength 20 with 17 attack skill and have decent prot. So, you know, they're good. They're very, very good. Shedim, we've also talked about Sheds before. Shedim are essentially storm demons, except instead of being ethereal, they have more hit points, and they are not... So they're not ethereal, they have more hit points, and stat-wise, they're otherwise very, very similar. They also have the same attacks. I believe they have higher strength, so their lightning actually does more damage than storm demons. Shedim get summoned 3 at a time, and they can be summoned by Hinnom, Baratos, Ashdod, or Gath for 3 blood, blood 3, air 1. This is actually easier for most of these nations to get than blood 2, air 2. So generally speaking, I would say Shedim are worth summoning over Storm Demons, especially because now they're actually slightly cheaper. Storm Demons are up to 10 slaves each, and Shedim are 9 1/3 slaves each. So definitely worthwhile. Very powerful units. The possession of Se'ir and Shedim really does kind of define, especially Baratos. Baratos will summon these guys a lot. Although sometimes I see them summoning Storm Demons instead of Shedim, but overall I would say Shedim are probably a superior choice. Release Lord of Civilization. You gotta love that voice crack. Sorry, I'm fighting a cold again. This winter's been terrible. Release Lord of Civilization summons one of the unique Grigori commanders. They're all extremely powerful mages. They give you a variety of different paths. All of the Grigori paths that your commanders have. It's expensive. It comes late in the game. It says they have these capture commander corruption effect. That doesn't actually do anything. I believe that's broken and has been for some time. But they're all very powerful supercombatants, especially Azazel. They're all very powerful casters. They all have damage reversal and a ton of invulnerability. They all have fear. They're all stealthy. They all resist all elements. So they're, except for cold. They don't resist cold for some reason. And they're sacred. So they are incredibly powerful. They are some of the few units that you specifically cannot wish for. They have the tag No Wish, which makes it make you unable to wish for them. If you wish for Grigori, you get. It used to be that you got a joke character named Gregorius, the master of the games, who is actually a hero of Late Age Pythium. But I think they changed that lately. In any case, you don't get the Grigori because they're considered just too powerful for that, I guess. So, yeah, they're extremely potent. They don't really define Hinnom, but they're a nice Benny for the late game. Sanguine Heritage, however, is one of those spells that absolutely defines the nation. Late Age Ulm, we've talked about Late Age Ulm, we've talked about Vampire Counts. Vampire Counts are just as good as Vampire Lords, but cheaper, and they require no research. So as soon as you get 44 slaves, you can summon a Vampire Count. That Vampire Count can Blood Hunt, he can get hold of a Skull Staff and either a Blood Booster or just be empowered to Blood 3, which is may actually be cheaper in some circumstances. But you can just hand him a Bloodthorn and he can't hold a Bloodthorn and a Skull Staff at the same time. So yeah, Skull Staff, Empower, now he can summon more Vampire Counts. Late Age Ulm has easily recruitable Blood Hunters, so you will churn out tons and tons of Vampire Counts. Yeah, Vampire Counts are slightly lesser than real Vampire Lords in that their paths are lower, but otherwise they're pretty much identical. And they still have Death 2, and they still have Blood 2, so they are more than good enough. Very, very powerful summon, especially for early in the game. One popular Late Age Ulm strategy involves blood hunting very, very early to start getting Vampire Counts in year 1. So before 24 turns have passed, you're already churning out Immortals, and that can be very powerful. Late Age Marignon has 2 special blood spells. One is Bind Harlequin. It summons this little demon jester guy. It's extremely cheap, and the only effect that he has is that he has standard 1, so he will cancel out the penalty for mixing demons and humans in the same squad. That's the only reason for Harlequins. The other, however, is Reascendance, and Reascendance summons Fallen Angels, which are essentially kind of a lesser version of the Grigori. They are powerful supercombatant chassis. They have invulnerability, fear, they resist fire. They have this Dark Fire Sword, which is effectively... It's kind of a bastardization of a Greatsword of Sharpness and a Firebrand. It's quite a potent weapon. And if you give them even some very basic gear, they can be extremely powerful because they have the paths to cast Phoenix Pyre and Soul Vortex, as well as blood spells like Damage Reversal on themselves. So a Fallen Angel can cast 3 buffs, be geared out with a little bit of Earth gear and such to give him some reinvigoration and some protection, some armor, and basically just fly into an enemy army and destroy it. They're very powerful. They're once again late game, but only 88 slaves, only slightly more expensive than a Vampire Lord. Definitely worthwhile. Late Age Marignon, if they reach Blood 7, absolutely wants to get these guys. Niflheim likewise only has 1 national blood spell. We've talked about this actually just recently. Illwinter makes the entire world cold 3 and spawns random indie attacks and causes unrest everywhere. So very good for Niflheim. It doesn't really hurt them, and it hurts everyone else quite badly. Now we get into the nations that are really dependent on their national spells. The Mictlan-Xibalba lines of nations, the Mesoamerican nations essentially, all share these spells except for some of them are Mictlan specific. and there aren't many that are Xibalba specific. Xibalba has these First Soul spells there, but beyond that, all of these are either Mictlan only or shared between Mictlan and Xibalba. Beast Bats are okay. Beast Bats are not terribly special units, but they are sacred, which is nice. Jaguar Fiends, however, Ocelotls are the real defining unit. Ocelotls are a lot like Seir. And if we look at them side by side, you can see what I mean. Both are triple attack, both size 3, both have high hit points, relatively low prot, decent stats. In fact, they actually share stat lines in most ways. Attack, defense, and strength are actually the same. The difference is Ocelotls fly and Seir berserk. And they have different survivals. But so basically, Ocelotls are good for the same reason that Seirim are good. They are triple attack sacreds that are summonable for a relatively low cost. Ocelotls cost 16 blood slaves for 3. Seirim cost 23 blood slaves for 5. Cost is extremely comparable. Ocelotls can be summoned very, very easily, because both Mictlan and Xibalba have mages that just have these paths at base, pretty much, or they're reliant on a 33% random at worst. And they're just incredibly powerful. You give them, I mean, you want like an awful hellish bless as both Mictlan and Xibalba, and what that means is Ocelotls will get to apply that hellish bless to their triple attacks and do 1,000,000 points of damage. They function a lot like Nazca's Condors, but they're more efficient at it, because they have more hit points, higher strength, and more attacks. So, yeah, Ocelotl spam is a classic part of the Mictlan Xibalba late game. Mictlan can also summon a number of commanders. They can summon the Sevitateu, who is like a... the Sevitateu is similar to a Vampire Lord in terms of what they do, but comes earlier, costs less, is less powerfully magical, and isn't immortal. But what they are is stealthy and ethereal and reanimated priests. So Civitateus can spam out undead. Civitateus have a life drain attack. You can give them a black heart and turn them into assassins. And that life drain attack plus death magic in assassinations is quite powerful. Tzitzimitl, assuming I'm pronouncing that right, I don't think are super important, to be honest. You summon them one at a time. They cost death and astral. They have this stellar bolt attack, which does armor negating damage. That's pretty cool. And the pincer and the scorpion tail. So yeah, you can use these guys, absolutely. Only early age and late age Mictlan have them. Late age Mictlan does not. They're not bad. They're not bad at all. They're a little bit low prot, but they have high hit points and excellent stats, which kind of makes up for it. And they can hold their own either in melee or at range. Armor negating missiles are fairly rare. So if you're fighting someone who's relying very heavily on high prot, or dropping spells like Army of Lead or something like that a lot, Tzitzimitl might be a way to counter that. I haven't really used them much, but stat-wise, they are quite potent. They're just more expensive than Ocelotls, and Ocelotls mostly do the job. Tlawapuki, once again, I'm slaughtering these names, and I apologize, but there's no way I can pronounce these things correctly. They fly, they can shape change into dogs, and they are death nature blood mages. So, they're good. Once again, they're pretty good. Honestly, I would actually use these ladies as assassins over the Civitateus, because they have nature so they can cast Swarm. And so you can go into an assassination, cast Swarm, and that will distract the enemy at least. That'll kill most unarmored mages already, and then you can point at them dramatically and drain their life, which is pretty cool. And then you have Oniki. And Oniki, of course, we know about from talking about Xibalba. These Oniki are the same as the ones that Xibalba recruits. And you can also just summon them for 101 blood slaves. They're very, very powerful mages, plus they are priests. They auto-summon beast bats in battle. They are powerful blood searchers, and they can random up to blood 4 or death 3. So, very, very good stuff. In general, of the Mictlan Xibalba spells, Reign of Jaguars is the most important, because it's the one that summons 14 Ocelotls for less than 4 gems each. It's less than 3 gems each, actually. It's pretty good. It is pretty good. 14 triple attack sacreds for 40 blood slaves. I'll buy that for $1. You hit blood 8 and you start spamming out Reign of Jaguars, and everyone drowns in flying cats of death. These spells are, as I said, completely nation defining for Mictlan, and then Xibalba also to a significant extent. Break the First Soul and Gift of the First Soul, less defining, but Break the First Soul does cause people to bleed and then potentially also give them diseases. There's no save for the bleed effect, so this is a strictly better version of the spell Bleed, because Bleed lets you get a save to avoid it. You do not get a save to avoid Break the First Soul. It's blood 2 instead of blood 0. It doesn't actually cost any blood slaves. It only takes 20 fatigue. So, but it's precision 5. It doesn't auto hit. So, there's kind of pros and cons. Gift of the First Soul, on the other hand, is hilarious because it is personal regeneration, but in blood. So for Shibalban thugs or supercombatants that have blood, they can just cast Gift of the First Soul and be happy. This goes for your god as well. If you take a god who has blood, they can cast Gift of the First Soul on themselves. Unfortunately, it doesn't stack with personal regeneration, so you can't cast personal regeneration and then Gift of the First Soul for extra regeneration. That would be too broken. So now we get down to Lanka. And as I said in the last game, I'm actually playing Lanka in an upcoming game, Accidental Ascension 4. So this is interesting to me right at the moment. So all of these are summons. All of Lanka's national spells summon units. And I'm just going to pull up all of those units and line them up so we can take a look at them. And we can talk about what the spells do really and why they're powerful. Lankan troop summons are going to essentially replace Lankan recruitable units pretty early on if you can manage it, because Lankan recruitable units, not fantastic. Lankan blood summon units, pretty damn good. And their summonable commanders are fantastic. So, what we've got here is, on the top row, we've got troops, mostly. On the bottom row, we've got commanders. Or things that you want to turn into commanders as quickly as we can. And we're also going to turn on the advanced information here. On the top row, we've got... I need to shift this over. So these vampires, I'm keeping them here for comparison. Prakasas, Rakshasha, Asrapas, Rakshasha Warriors, and Sandhyabalas. The most important of these, in my opinion, are the Asrapas, and that might not be obvious looking at their stats, but here's why. So Prakasas get summoned in huge numbers, efficiently, for about 3 blood slaves each. They're easy to summon, and they have lots of HP and lots of strength, so you can use them as siege chaff. All of the monkey ones, all of the ape ones, have resist fire -1, -5, and a supply penalty, and chaos power. So fire is super effective against them, but beyond that, they're actually quite powerful. Prakasas tend to die a little bit easily because they have Prot 4. They also only have 1 attack, so they're not very efficient in combat. A better version of Prakasas is Rakshashas. They're summoned in smaller numbers, but for about the same price, and they have 2 attacks. They have 2 claw attacks instead of the 1 mace, so they don't hit as hard, but they hit a lot more. Overall, I would only really summon Prakasas for like siege chaff or something. Rakshashas can actually fight. All of these guys are sacred, so they can all take your bless, and this is one reason why Lanka tends to take a really, really powerful bless, because all of these already pretty good units can take it. Rakshasa Warriors are Rakshasa, but they're wearing armor and they have iron cudgels, which do a ton of damage, like over 30 damage once you count their strength bonus. So they're much better. They're more expensive, they're 5 gems each, but they're also summoned 5 at a time instead of 3 at a time, so the efficiency is a lot better. Rakshasa Warriors are very, very solid, especially if you're trying to counter thugs. That high damage from the Iron Cudgel, with a high attack skill and chaos power. As Lanka, you're running Turmoil, because you get a blood hunting bonus in Turmoil, and so this gives you essentially +3 to all your stats over here. Rakshasa Warriors really love that, and so Rakshasa Warriors in Turmoil will hit for well over 30 damage per hit at attack skill 16, and they will absolutely bludgeon things to death, no trouble. However, Asrapas are, I think, the most important of the Lankan sacred units for a couple reasons. First of all, they're not vulnerable to fire, so you don't have to worry about that necessarily. Secondly, they have 2 attacks, and one of them is a life drain. So the Athame attack, well, drains life, which means it heals them for 1 hit point +2 fatigue for every point of damage it does. And it has +2 attack, so their attack skill with that is 14. They only have strength 13, so stat-wise they're actually a lot worse than the Rakshasa Warriors. They also don't wear any armor, but their attack and defense skill are both quite high. Their magic resistance and morale are both good. You can cast buffs on them that will increase their protection, most notably Wooden Warriors, which Lanka can cast very easily. Now, of course, that will give them some fire vulnerability, but it still won't be as bad as the Rakshasa. And with the life drain, it's entirely possible for even relatively undefended Asrapas to charge into combat and keep themselves alive far longer than they should be able to just by draining life from their enemies. Also, if you really want to, later on in the game, you can Gift of Reason Asrapas into Sacred Blood Mage Priests. Now, you have Blood Mage priests recruitable as Lanka, so I'm not sure why you would really bother to do that, but it's an option. You can do it. Now, the interesting thing is, Asrapas, you can compare Asrapas straight across to vampires, and you can see what I mean about being similar but worse. Vampires have a lot better protection because they have invulnerability, and they're also stealthy. However, they only have one attack, which is a life drain. It does less damage, and they're not sacred. And Asrapas are 3 times cheaper. For the same price as Bloodright, and for much easier casting, you get 3 Asrapas or 1 vampire. This is why vampires aren't really used a whole lot, just because, like, Asrapas are a decent summon because you get a bunch of them and they have better combat stats. Vampires, they're really more chaff than anything because they have that invulnerability 25. They're also not demons, so the demon buffs don't affect them. But all of the Lankan summons are demons, which means that you can cast Bloodlust on them, and their strength will go up by 4 across the whole battlefield, no trouble, which will give Asrapas 17 damage, which will mean they're draining a lot of life, 21 life drain per attack, and it is piercing damage. You also have the Sandhyabalas. Sandhyabalas are more fire vulnerable than any of the other Lankan Sacreds. However, they're stealthy, they have dark power as well as chaos power, which means that if you can cast darkness in a Turmoil 3 province, they will be ecstatically powerful. And they have Moonblades, so against magic beings, they do a ton of damage. Otherwise, they're similar to Raksha Warriors in terms of stats, slightly better, especially they have better defense skill because they have bucklers. Yeah, they're not bad, but they're a lot more expensive, and I think they're more niche. You really only use these guys if you think there's a magic being that you want to hunt with them. The same is true with the commander version, the Summon Ashada. The Summon Ashada is an assassin, and a pretty decent assassin, except very slow. So, in melee with a Moonblade and a Dusk Dagger, this guy will absolutely annihilate most thugs, especially any thug who happens to be a magic being, like Elemental Royalty. However, outside of assassinations, probably just going to get killed in a battle. Danava's very, very powerful. They only come at blood 8. If you empower them, you get a random chances at blood and air, which is quite good. They also have multiple arms. They have 4 hand slots, which means they can carry 2 weapons and 2 shields. They're summoned as troops, and they're summoned 3 at a time for 75 blood slaves. Overall, probably not worth the cost. These 2, however, very much worth the cost. Dakini are a summonable at blood 6 for 81 blood slaves, slightly more than a vampire. They have damage reversal inherent to them. They can fly. They are demons. They're sacred, and they're level 2 priests, and they have blood 3, air 3, death 1. Death 1 means they can cast invulnerability on themselves very easily, although they shouldn't really need that because for some reason, their skull necklace gives them 11 armor. Like, just the necklace itself gives them a ton of armor, which is hilarious. They can Cloud Trapeze, they can cast Mistform on themselves, they can summon air elementals, and they can do all kinds of blood stuff, and they're powerful blood hunters. Plus, they have fear. Dakini are fantastic raiding thugs. With a relative minimum of equipment, they can clear provinces very efficiently, they can fight in battles very efficiently. They're just really good. Plus, you don't even have to give them weapons, because they have the Athame, they drain life. All they really need is some kind of way to keep themselves alive while they drain the life out of everyone around them, and or a powerful bless. And then you have the Mandeha. Mandeha are my favorite. They're not the most efficient. Dakini, needless to say, are extremely efficient uses of blood slaves. Like, spending blood slaves on Dakini, you can never go wrong that way. They're like vampire lords. They're just so good that they make most other options look bad by comparison. Mandeha, however, have one very specific use, which is that they cast darkness at the start of every battle. They take blood 8 and they cost 133 slaves a pop, but by the time you hit blood 8 as Lanka, 133 slaves shouldn't be a big ask. That should be a fraction of 1 turn's income. You should be making, 200, maybe 300 blood slaves a turn if you're doing well. If you're not doing well, it might be more expensive, but still, it's worth committing a full turn's income to summon a few Mandehas each, because a full turn each, that is, because their stats are insane. Their stats are really, really good. They come with a Flesh Eater, which means they're not going to be, driven off the battlefield by accident, and they cast Darkness, and they have Dark Power 3. So effectively, you actually have to increase each of these stats by 3 in order to see what they actually are. Plus, they have Chaos Power, so if you're fighting in Turmoil 3, all of their stats go up by 9, because they auto-darken the area. And that, of course, inflicts a significant penalty to everyone else around them. On top of that, they have the Sleep Aura, so anyone near them will go sleepy sheepy in fairly short order. Unfortunately, they are highly vulnerable to fire, so one fire elemental will absolutely fuck them up. And they're big targets and they're expensive. And those are pretty much the downsides. Also, they increase unrest, but who cares about that? You're Lanka. Every province you own is either a lifeless hellscape or is being patrolled the hell out by wolves. There's no chance of this causing serious problems for you. It will lower your income, though, a little bit. Mandehas have Death 3, Air 3, and Blood 2, plus they are Holy 3 priests. This means they can Soul Vortex, so that can definitely help keep them alive if they are targeted by enemy anti-thug squads or assassins or something. And this, of course, means they can Mistform, Cloud Trapeze, all that good stuff. So what I would use Mandehas for is army support, primarily. You put one in each army so it darkens the whole area. All of your demons have... Actually, do they? Do Lankan demons not have Spirit Sight? I could have sworn they did. I could have sworn they must. They have to have Dark Vision. There's no, Santiabalas would actually be pretty worthless if they didn't have Dark Vision. I mean, they've got Dark Power. Hold on a second. Okay, yeah, I just went into the game and double-checked. The Lankan Sacreds do, in fact, have Dark Vision 100. I don't know why the Inspector is not showing that, but it's true. They do. Okay, so, yeah, as I was saying, a Mandeha casts Battle Darkness automatically when it starts the battle. That puts everyone else at a severe disadvantage versus your demons. It penalizes everyone else's stats while leaving your demons and your undead, of which Lanka will also have a lot, completely unaffected. In fact, some of them have Dark Power, so their stats go up. And you use that differential, you leverage that to make your Sacreds win the fight, basically, because they are a lot more powerful relatively all of a sudden. I mean, a Rakshasa's defense skill 10 doesn't seem very impressive until your enemy is swinging at you with attack skill 7 or 8, in which case defense skill 10 all of a sudden seems pretty good. So, Lanka, Mictlan, Xibalba, and Hinnom, the Hinnom line of nations, all of those somewhat defined by their national blood spells. For the other nations, the national blood spells are additional, not super necessary, but still valuable. In particular, Sanguine Heritage for Ulm. Well, okay, Sanguine Heritage for Ulm actually is one of those nation-defining spells. Having access to vampire counts is a big fucking deal. It's a keystone of how Late Age Ulm plays in vanilla. If you're not running Silt or something, one of the other mods that nerfs Immortals, vampire counts are hugely important because it means that Late Age Ulm can hit that Immortal power spike way earlier than anybody else, and they can have a significant fraction of their mage core just be not dying in wars, which is an advantage that few other nations have, certainly not that early. But beyond them, like I said, Mictlan and Xibalba and Lanka are really the nations that are super, super into national blood summons. Bandarlog and Patala also get access to Lanka's blood summons. They don't have any native blood, but the power of the Lankan blood summons is one reason why it's generally recommended that you play Bandarlog and Patala with blood on your Pretender, so that you can break into blood as rapidly as possible and get access to some of these guys, in particular Dakini. Dakini are super, super powerful. They can blood hunt themselves, so you can get more of them. They can help you on the way to getting vampires. They can really push you in that direction. And they are Cloud Trapezing Air 3 mages who can support your armies with Fog Warriors, which is also a very powerful thing to have. If you have 2 Dakini, you can Cloud Trapeze them into the same province. One of them casts Storm, while the other is casting Storm Power, and some kind of personal buff, and then the Storm-powered one, who's now Air 4, casts Fog Warriors. So by about round 4 of the battle itself, your army is entirely mist-formed, and that's an incredibly potent ability to have. It's a similar thing that Jomon can do with a couple of Daitengu, albeit Daitengu are a little bit better at it because they can use Teaching Sign to boost themselves up. But in any case, hopefully that has been a little bit helpful in thinking about Blood. In general, as I've said, it's the nations with powerful national summons that are considered the most powerful Blood nations, because national Blood summons tend to be a hell of a lot better than generic Blood summons, and generic Blood summons are already powerful. Storm Demons, Devils, even Demon Knights, despite now costing so much, they're still good. They're still value. And national Blood summons are a lot better. So having access to them is something that has to be taken deeply into account when you're analyzing nations, because like Lanka, without these, Lanka would actually be a pretty weak nation nowadays. With them, I think Lanka is still very competitive, albeit not nearly as powerful as it used to be. But just having Dakini, having Asrapas, having Rakshasa Warriors for when you need them, having Mandeha to support your armies with darkness, that's a powerful ability. And it's something that Lanka wants to lean on and exploit very heavily in order to do well. But in any case, thanks for watching. I think I've taken up enough of your time with all of this, and I will see you in the next video.